I want to take you back to 1948. KTLA had just been on the air a very short time, and I know that the first big program that KTLA had was the running of the Hopalong Cassidy pictures. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Well, we had been a good 3.5 years getting the rights. This goes back to getting the rights to the Hopalong Cassidy character, which was a literary character, came from the books of Mulford, Clarence Mulford. So when Hoppy decided this is what he wanted to do with his life, to be Hopalong and to do some good with it, he had started in 1935 with the films. That they were for theaters. And then it was around end of 42 and 43 that he decided this is what he wanted to do. But we had to go after the rights. Now, there were all the rights, and it was merchandise, it was radio, it was records, there was journalism, they had the comic strips, the whole thing. So everything went. I mean, every last quarter we had went for that, because all the money was going out while we were getting this, and he wouldn't do anything else. He didn't want to, in other words, he wouldn't accept other pictures. He wanted to stay Hopalong Cassidy, which he did from the 1935 until the day he died. But in those about 3.5 years or so, we were getting the different rights, and he finally got making the 6 pictures a year for theaters. And then it was in the original contract, which was in 1935, that Clarence Mulford evidently had a very bright lawyer, because he had in that original contract, they banned, they held two, as well as the other rights, was television. Now in 1935, not too many people knew about television. So the very last little string that we got was the television rights. And as soon as we got that, we had found out, and this was by chance. We had stopped at one of those nut burger places, and right next to us was a cameraman that had been worked on some of the Hoppies, and Hoppy looked over at him and he said, "Hey Bud," he said, "can you run films on TV?" Because everything was live. The Kathy Fiscus case, which sold, the beginning of TV. Everything was live, and the cameraman thought a minute, and he said, yeah, you can run film. Well, that was it. And when we got that last string, which was then in 48, I guess that was, he made the deal with KTLA to go on that fall session, August, September, whenever that actually was, it started. And, you're right, I did literally put KTLA on the map, because it was and of course from there it blossomed. I mean, he went, I guess it was nationwide, NBC, it was like 50. That was a big year. It started probably in end of 49 something. And then 50, that it just exploded. And then it was all over everything.
What do you think the appeal of Hopalong Cassidy is?
He really was a charismatic character. You could see the goodness in him. And I think, and the fact that it wasn't just the children. You found the mothers. I must say, he was one of the handsomest men you've ever seen. He was a beautiful man. Everything went together. His size and his voice and his coloring, had marvelous color. He had high coloring, like a baby, his baby skin, and he had the black eyebrows and the silver hair, which he had was a family trait. His brothers had it too. They started to turn gray in the early 20s. Bill was 19 when he started. It was just the streak. And what they used to do in the old days, because he started in the picture business, in 1919 with DeMille. So that was, in the silent days. And what they used to do there, he said they used brown grease paint on the hair, and that's why everybody thought he was a blonde, because he had been a blonde, but he had turned that, and it was different. When people get gray hair, they get gray hair, but when you turn early like that, it's another color. It's almost like platinum. There's life to it, and he was just a beautiful guy. And as I say, the women, of course, went crazy. And when we were traveling, believe me, it was a problem. Yes, you find them under the beds. They call up and say, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to Hoppy. I was going around with a baseball bat. But no, it was good. But the men also admired him. And to see a man with his little child come up and want Hoppy, to talk to him or touch him or something, because he had what, 3 generations. He had the kids, he had the mothers and fathers, and then he had the grandmothers and the grandfathers that remembered him from the silent days as handsome leading man.
Now I want to talk about that because he did make some of the Hoppy features in the late 30s and early 40s. Okay, and there were the people who knew. Now here it is, 1948, this whole television revolution. He was sort of discovered all over again, and then there was the merchandise, the clothes, and the everything. Talk to me a little about that.
Altogether, something like 2,400 items. I think everything that you can think of. But he was also very careful about that. There were some things that he would not put his name on unless he believed in it and thought it was quality. And you find that everything was quality, because I still see people, they come up and they say, I wore his shirt, my brother wore his shirt, and they go, and I had the whole outfit. And mothers would call and say, please tell my son that you take your spurs off when you go to bed, And police officers would call and say, Hoppy, would you talk to this boy? And they said, and they would say, that would do more good than they could do ever, because they listened. They would listen to Hoppy, and they believed him, they trusted him.
Now, wasn't it unusual for a hero to be all wearing black clothes? Was he the first?
I think so, because they always said the white hats were the good guys. But it was a brilliant move, I think, because it was a powerful black and white. The horse is white, and the horse was, oh, what a blessing he was. Because he actually saw. Most horses, they kind of look, but they're not really registering, And Topper would look, and he just loved to look. He would let kids, they'd pull hairs out of his tail and parade. And I saw him once down San Diego. There was a bunch of kids around him, and I could see kind of Topper was doing this. I didn't know what it was until later. I saw Bill reach down and pick up this little 3-year-old or something from under the horse's belly. He had been saying, Hoppy, 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 on the door. He was hitting the horse's belly, and he'd pick him up and put him on the horse. But that Topper you trusted him. And when Topper died, that's when he said, okay, no more parades. He wouldn't trust another horse, and that was it was probably January, the New Year's Day parade of '61, and then he went. I guess it was 3 weeks after the parade. Topper was fine, everything was wonderful, and about 3 weeks later, Topper went out to his trailer, which he loved. He loved to travel. He had white kid glove leather, inside, all tufted white leather, all black outside, and it had portholes so he could look out. And he went out to his trailer one night and just went to sleep. And that was it. He was 26 years old, which is a good age. Of course, they do live longer, some of them, but it was a good age. And then 3 weeks later, the groom, who'd been with him all those years, died of a heart attack. And that's when Hoppy said, maybe they're trying to tell me something, And the fact that he wouldn't do another parade, the horses.
And Bill never took another role after that, did he?
Oh, no. From 1935, when he started Hopalong Cassidy, he never did anything else. David Selnick David Selznick practically begged me on his knees to work on Bill, to get him to do that Duel in the Sun, the part that Gregory Peck did. And Bill said no, because he said it's a horrible, miserable character. And people think of me as Hoppy, and I want to keep it that way, and I wouldn't change it. He didn't do that. He also turned down The High and the Mighty. John Wayne wanted him for that. And he said no. He said no, because that was another character completely. And he said, but you should do it. He said, why the hell don't you do it? And John Wayne did. It was great. It was perfect. Yeah, it was perfect.
Now, at this time, which was in the late 40s. No, I'm going back.
Go back, yeah.
When the television series hit, you also had Hobbyland, didn't you? An amusement park.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was wonderful. It turned out so beautifully, and it's a strange kind of place. It was a weird kind of place, which is now, I don't know, Venice, or I guess around in there. But anyway, it was wonderful. It opened, and everything was great but we were doing so much traveling then. And when we came back one time, we heard that some of the vendors were shafting the public, and they were not doing what they should do. And Hoppy didn't want any part of that. He said, unless I can know, I can't be here. If I could be here, that would be one thing. But if I can't be here and I can't trust the people to do what they should do, I don't want any part of it. And so he just gave it up. So it wasn't there too long, but it was wonderful while it was there. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question: of all of the events that occurred, what is your favorite moment? Your favorite Hopalong Cassidy memory? Do you have one?
No. There are too many. There are too many things. There are too many. God, the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs and everything that went on. And we were so close, because literally we were married for 35 years when he died. And we had been separated 2 nights in that whole 35 years. And that was just when I left location to come back to the ranch, basically. It was like Christmas. It was a holiday. And I came back the day before. He was going to finish shooting the next day and come on down. So I'd get back to the ranch and start to get everything ready for Christmas. And the first time, he broke his leg, stepped off the horse, hit a rock, and it just splintered. It was one of those bad ones, when they come through. He did that the first time. The second night we were separated, it was the same thing. I was coming back to the ranch. And he was shooting behind a rock. He was shooting out, and they were, shooting at him. And they used the blanks, but they were copper-jacketed blanks that they kind of splinter when they explode. Well, what happened was one of the bullets hit the rock where he was shooting out, and it splintered, and it ricocheted off the rock, and it hit his eye, and it cut it. And the only thing that saved the eye was that he turned, just at the last minute where he was shooting out, he turned his eyes to look at something else, and it went across the eye, but it didn't hit the iris. It just cut the eye. But of course, that was like around Kernville. And there, it's like 2 hours to the hospital, whatever hospital get there. And that was really scary. But it was fine. He had no problem with the eyesight. But he said after that, too, he said, I think you better behave yourself. He said, you stay right close. He said, I'm not going to go for that third time. So, which is really basically true. We're always together.
Now, in all of the Hoppy TV series, I don't recall that he ever killed anyone, did he?
Only the bad guys.
The bad guys.
Whatever. They might have been. Normally, there was very little killing in it. Yeah, and even the fights weren't too long, because he said it's ridiculous. He said, I'm not going to hit that guy, right in the jaw, and have him get up and go on for 15 minutes with this thing. This is ridiculous. And the same with the rides. You know, when they ran out of story, they used to have a long ride. They go galloping off and chases and all that stuff. It's exciting, but there wasn't any story. So he was very much interested in the story, what the basis of the story was, what it was telling, and that it was a good story. The script was very important to him. It wasn't just a matter of fights and rides and saving the heroine or something. Yeah, well, he was a more mature man to start with. He was also an actor to start with. And he was, with the whole thing was, of course, he was William Boyd playing Hopalong Cassidy, whereas normally you had Roy and you had Jean playing Roy and Jean, which was different than when it came to getting the rights and all that. So it was, it was one of those things that was just, it was worth it to do it, basically whether it worked or not. You know, if it hadn't worked, it still would have been the right thing to do. But as it happened, it was right, it did work, and the timing was unbelievable. I mean, and when it happened, and as I say, exploded. It did. It just went all over the world, and it was the same way. We had a cameraman that did a lot of John Wayne's later, and he was down in Africa with Wayne on that picture he made there, and he said they were in parts of Africa where no white men had been, and he came out and he said, I was white. He said, I thought I was going to faint. I couldn't believe it. One of the natives came up and spoke in whatever the dialect was, and it was, what about the coin? What about the coin? And he couldn't believe it. And they had heard or saw or something, the little good luck Hopalong Cassidy coins that he used to give out, because they were wonderful when, your plane is leaving and you can't sign all the autographs. People they get hurt, and you just can't do it. And so I said, well, everybody always had, not a hopalong, they didn't have it then, but would have a good luck coin. And I know I used to have, I had a penny that was all framed from the Store Club in New York, and I used to carry that around with me. And that's when they finally made up a batch of the Hopalong Cassidy coins. And that, I used to be the carrier of that. We'd be in airports, because it weighed, and then you used to worry about weight on a plane. So I made up for my lightweight with the coin, and I'd have that big leather bag and that, and I'd have those on. And when the plane would get the last word that it had to be leaving, and there was still a lot of people around, you'd take a handful of the coins, throw them up in the air, and boy, everybody would scramble, and we'd be on the plane. So it worked very well, and everybody was happy.
Now, even today, the radio shows are on still.
Yes, and there's also a dairy in Fresno that is running the films. They have since 1950. Now, if you can believe that, they're still. I remember he called us once. We were in New York, and he said, "Hoppy," he said, I want you to make some new pictures. He said, I've run these over and over and over again. And Hoppy said, what have you run last? Because he had the 56 hour-longs that were in there for the theater, and then he had the others, I think 106 altogether of the films, of the shorter ones for TV, and then the hour-long ones for the theater. And he said, I've just run the short ones, the TV ones. He said, well, go back, run the hour-long ones again. And if you don't make any money, if it doesn't up, he had come up from nothing to the top, dairyman in the area. And he said, if you don't increase your earnings, he said, you don't have to pay me a quarter. And sure enough, he did. And he's still doing it to this day, which is, this is, 50? This is 46 years they've been running. I was like, and it was like we were when we went to Australia, we stopped at Darwin Now, Darwin is where the Aborigines are. They have a compound there. And this, it was the heat, the moisture, and the mosquito net over the bed was just laying on my face, and I couldn't breathe. And you put a toe out, you'd put your nose out, and the mosquitoes would be there. Oh, it was terrible. But we were met by the Aborigines, the leader, whoever it was, the little Aborigine compound, and they were at the plane to meet us when we came in, and we had not known. They told us later then, the Governor General or whoever he was.
He is sagging, but his mind
But
is
the
still,
mind
yeah,
is
absolutely.
Well, that's
absolutely.
what we all hope for.
All right, now let me take you back to Darwin. So you're in the tent.
Oh yeah, we're in Darwin.
You're in the tent, and the
yeah,
netting is over.
That's all right. That's only my personal view of. That's about all I saw of Darwin, because we were off the next morning for Sydney. But we found out that they had run. They had built in the compound. They had built a little theater for the Aborigines. And the first night, the first film they saw was a Hopi film. And they went crazy. They absolutely went crazy. They loved it. So the next Sunday, whenever it was, Saturday or Sunday, they set the date. Once a week they were going to have a theater showing. They got another Hopi for them, and they ran that, and they nearly tore the place down. They nearly destroyed it. They wanted that first picture that they saw. They didn't want they wanted that picture. Now this, when we arrived, was 2 years later. And they were still running that first Hopi every Saturday night in Darwin. Yeah. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they're still running it. But those are amazing people, those Aborigines, just amazing.
Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Klaus Landsberg from KTLA?
Oh, from KTLA. Yeah. Oh, he was a giant. He was a giant, that man, yeah. Tremendous.
He made the deal. Did he make the deal with you folks for the pictures?
Yes. Yeah.
Wasn't there something in there that the NBC station in LA could not run Hopi, that they had to be on the KTLA station, but that the NBC could run it other places? I
think in the first, they did have that, until it just then generally went to NBC and later. But I don't know the timing on that, how long it worked.
Did you have a favorite Hopi feature, or?
I had a couple that were different, because it wasn't, when he played different characters, which is one, he played an English buffoon for one. It was one of his undercover works, and then there were others that were more like in Old Mexico, where it was pretty much story and the setting of Mexico, and and another one that was supposed to be in South America was done in Arizona. It was all the wild horses. So you had that, and so you had you had stories, you had action ones, you had costumey ones, and it was, I can't say I think one day, and then, oh God, I think of another one. I said, yeah, that was great.
I bet you got a lot of fan mail.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And that's one of my problems right now, to try to keep up. I think I'm about 6 months behind on it. Yeah.
Were the...
Well, they had, there's a Hopalong fan club that's very, very active. I go back every year to Ohio, where Cambridge is where we say this is hometown. He was born actually right outside of Cambridge, a little town called Henrysburg, which wasn't even a little town. It's like one of those little string towns. But I think when he was about 6, they moved into Cambridge. So Cambridge is his hometown, and every year they have this annual 3-day weekend, and people come from all over the country. They come from Canada, they come from all over for this Hopi thing. I go back every year. So it was special, of course, too, last year, because of being the 100th anniversary. And then in New York, they had the Museum of the Moving Image, They had a retrospective of the memorabilia, and I went back for that. That was wonderful. And he was inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City, the National Cowboy Hall of Fame there.
Do we know what the most valuable piece of memorabilia, Hoppy memorabilia, there is? Do we know?
I don't know really. There's a couple of ones that are very rare as far as cost. It would probably be the saddle. I mean, actual monetary value. But on all this memorabilia, those 2,400 items or something altogether. There are some, I'm sure. Well, I know. What just a couple of years ago, Hammacher Schlemmer in New York, they had 12 of those hop-along restored bicycles, and oh God, they're beautiful. They were, with the tassels, the gold tassels, the whole thing, and I opened this catalog of Hammacher Schlemmer, and I saw they had 12, they said, and they were going for $6,500 a piece. And they say of all the Western memorabilia that the Hoppy is the most expensive. In other words, it's the most valuable. So there's quite a bit of it out now too.
As there should be.
As there should be. And it's amazing how well it does hold up. Because that's where I went back to the quality of everything that was made. It wasn't slipshod. It wasn't anything. And he wouldn't do. Actually, he never did. You know, when he did the little squibs after the television show, was a little squib about wear your rain boots when it rains. Listen to your mother. Drink your milk. He would always say, "Drink your milk." He didn't say, "Drink Borden's milk" or anything. He didn't commercialize those things. They were just for the good of what they could do. And there was a lot of comment from parents about that too, because it was so helpful.
He had a great laugh, didn't he?
Oh, could you? You couldn't miss it. When he first called me for a date, when he first called me, he didn't know, of course, that I had been in love with him since I was 12 years old, back in Brooklyn. That's when I fell in love with him. I just thought he was the most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen. And I had his name all over my school books. And I came out. I was going to be a concert pianist. I had a 2-year scholarship to Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And actually, a producer saw me in dancing school. And I wasn't for career-wise, it was just the young girls went to dancing school then. And he saw me, said, I'm putting a show on Broadway in the fall, I'd like you to be in my show. And Mother and I were just, that was it. Dad had died when I was 10. She was an only child, I was an only child. And I think she thought it might be exciting, to try it. So all of a sudden I was in show business. And I did the show, I did everything in New York. I worked 20 hours a day. But then Paramount, a director from Paramount saw me. And I was dancing at the Paradise, which was one of the 2 top nightclubs in New York in those days, which was owned by the gangsters. They owned everything then. And right across the street, I was at the Paradise, and right across the street was the Hollywood. And who am I thinking? Harriet Nelson was there with Ozzy, and that's when we first knew each other. And then she wound up, we were practically neighbors. She lived down the road a bit here in Laguna. So until she died just last year. But that's how I got out to California. And so when he called, but talking about, going back to that, when he called, I thought, everybody knew me, knew how crazy and I had this mad crush on him. And I'd had my romances, but no, he was the one, always. And so I thought it was somebody pulling my leg. This is William Boyd, sure, sure you are. And so I played it very cool, and he was inviting me. He was having a small party at his Malibu place, and would I join him there? And I don't know. I said something, and he laughed. That did it. I mean, who could, copy that laugh? So I was pretty much nothing. Nothing would come out. So fine, but I made it a date that he would come and pick me up. I was not going to go meet him anyway. So he came to the door. Mother answered the door. I had a little townhouse in Beverly Hills, and I was upstairs. And she said, Grace will be down in a minute. And I came down, and he told me later, he said, I saw the legs, I saw the body, I saw the face. And when I came down, he put his arms out, and I walked right into his arms. And I started to, I tear up very easily. I'm very emotional. And I started to tear up, and I thought, oh, yeah, this is no way to do it. But it was, that was it. He proposed the third night. Said I would have proposed the first night, except I was afraid of scaring you to death. And we were married 3 weeks to the day we met. And we had to wait that 3 weeks because he was, in those days it was a year for a divorce, and he was 3 weeks away from a divorce when we met. And we met, and then he said, I'm going to take you up to the ranch. I'm going to take your shoes away from you, and I'm going to plant cactus all around the place. So behave yourself, I don't want to be doing this again. So what? It was 35 years.
Oh, that's great.